"You kissed me while I was out?" the rancher blurted. She smirked. "I saved your life, cowboy." Luke McAllister had always been an early riser. The first rays of sunlight spilling over the hills were his favorite part of the day, a quiet moment before the ranch came alive with the sounds of cattle, horses, and the occasional barking dog. He prided himself on knowing every corner of his property, every fence post, and every winding path through the pastures. Today, though, he had a feeling something was off. The sky, though clear in the east, carried a strange gray tint over the western hills, like a warning. He shrugged it off. Storms came and went on the plains, and he'd faced worse. Clad in his weathered boots, faded jeans, and a flannel shirt that had seen better days, Luke swung his legs over the side of his old pickup and started the engine. The vehicle coughed and rumbled awake, spitting a little black smoke before settling into its usual hum. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint smell of wet earth from yesterday's rain. Luke checked his pockets. Notebook, pen, and a pocket knife. He never went anywhere without. Satisfied, he drove toward the corral, thinking about the day ahead. The cattle needed checking, the fence repairs couldn't wait, and a stubborn bull named Bramble had been acting strangely for the last few days. As Luke drove along the dirt path, he noticed that the storm clouds were moving faster than he had expected. The wind had picked up slightly, rustling the grass in a soft, eerie whisper. Luke shook his head. "It's nothing," he muttered aloud, more to himself than anyone else. He parked the truck at the corral, jumped down, and adjusted his hat against the gusts. Bramble, a large, imposing bull with a coat like polished mahogany, had been trouble before, but today something in his eyes made Luke pause. The animal pawed the ground nervously, snorting steam into the cold morning air. Luke knew Bramble's stubbornness was matched only by his strength. Getting him into the proper pen for inspection would take all of his skill and patience. He walked slowly toward the gate, his voice calm but firm. "Easy there, big guy, calm down." Bramble's ears flicked back, and he snorted again, this time louder. Luke extended a hand, trying to soothe the animal, but the bull's agitation only increased. Something wasn't right. Luke's eyes scanned the corral and noticed a section of fencing near the far corner that looked off. A post was leaning dangerously, probably loosened by the wind and the rain from yesterday. That would explain Bramble's behavior. A weakened fence could make even the calmest bull anxious. Luke moved toward the section to check it, trying to keep Bramble calm. He didn't notice the wind picking up even more, carrying a sudden chill and an unsettling smell of ozone. The clouds overhead darkened quickly, and within minutes, the sky had turned a deep gray. The storm was arriving faster than expected. Just as he reached the damaged fence, Bramble's agitation turned into full-blown panic. The bull reared back suddenly, eyes wide, nostrils flaring, and charged. Luke barely had time to jump to the side, grabbing the fence post for support. His heart pounded in his chest as he watched the massive animal slam into the fence, splintering wood and snapping ropes. Bramble broke free, his heavy hooves thundering against the ground. And for a terrifying moment, Luke realized he was directly in the path of the bull. He took a step back, his boots skidding slightly on the loose dirt. "Easy, boy! Calm down!" he shouted, his voice cracking. Bramble charged again, faster this time. Luke's mind raced. He knew he couldn't outrun the bull, and trying to push him back would only make things worse. He needed help, and fast. From the corner of his eye, he saw movement on the edge of the pasture. At first, he thought it was another ranch hand, but then he recognized the figure. Clara Thompson, the neighboring ranch's vet, was running toward him, her coat flapping behind her and a determined look on her face. Luke didn't have time to call out. Clara shouted something, but the roar of the storm and the pounding hooves drowned out her words. With remarkable agility, Clara positioned herself between Bramble and Luke, waving her arms to distract the bull. She moved quickly, stepping to the side just as Bramble lunged, her timing perfect. Luke froze, astonished and grateful, as Clara guided the bull away from him, moving with a confidence and bravery that left him breathless.
"Luke, step back!" she yelled, her voice strong against the howling wind.
Luke didn't hesitate. He took a cautious step back as Clara led Bramble in a wide circle, keeping him focused and distracted. She whispered to the bull, her words soft but commanding, and for a moment it was as if the animal understood her. Slowly she guided Bramble toward a safer section of the corral, where the fencing was still strong, and secured the bull with ropes and a calm hand. Luke finally allowed himself to breathe. His chest heaved, and his hands shook slightly. He looked at Clara, who was brushing mud from her coat, her cheeks flushed from exertion and cold. Before he could even thank her properly, she leaned forward and, without warning, pressed a quick kiss on his cheek. Luke's eyes went wide. He stumbled back a step, completely unprepared for the bold move. The storm continued around them, lightning flashing in the distance and thunder rolling across the hills, but all Luke could focus on was the sudden warmth of Clara's action. "You what?" he stammered, completely flustered. Clara smirked, her eyes sparkling with both mischief and satisfaction. "I saved your life, cowboy," she said simply, as if that explained everything. Luke opened his mouth, but no words came out. He had always prided himself on being calm, collected, and in control. But right now, soaked from the rain and shocked by the audacity of the kiss, he felt entirely unmoored. The bull was calm now, the danger past, yet his heart continued to pound in a way it hadn't since he was a boy learning to ride for the first time. Clara glanced at him, a hint of amusement in her eyes. "Are you going to just stand there, or are you going to say thank you?" Luke cleared his throat, finally finding his voice. I don't know what I would have done without you." Clara shrugged, brushing off her coat again. "Probably been flattened by Bramble," she said, teasing, though her eyes held genuine concern. "You really need to check those fences more often, you know." Luke laughed nervously, the tension easing slightly. "Yeah, I know. Lesson learned." He shook his head, trying to refocus on the task at hand. "Come on, let's get this fixed before the storm really hits." Together they worked quickly, reinforcing the weakened fence with whatever materials they had on hand. Luke couldn't help but steal glances at Clara, still amazed by her bravery and skill. Despite the chaos of the storm and the fear of the charging bull, there was something exhilarating about the way she moved, confident, fearless, and completely unafraid of danger. By the time they finished, the rain was pouring steadily, soaking them to the bone. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the corral in brief, brilliant flashes. Luke looked at Clara, admiration and gratitude written all over his face. She just laughed, shaking her head. "You really are hopeless sometimes," she said, though her tone was gentle. Luke couldn't help but grin, feeling a strange mix of embarrassment and awe. He realized then that this morning had changed everything, not just because of the storm or the bull or the kiss, but because he had met someone who was unafraid to step into danger, someone who had reminded him that even the most predictable life could hold surprises. As they trudged back to the ranch house, soaked and muddy but safe, Luke's mind kept replaying the kiss, Clara's smirk, and her confident words, "I saved your life, cowboy." He couldn't deny that it made his pulse race, even in the middle of a storm. And deep down he knew that this was only the beginning of something that neither of them could have expected. Luke McAllister sat at the kitchen table, drying his hair with an old towel still dripping from the morning's storm. The smell of wet earth clung to his clothes, mixing with the faint scent of coffee brewing on the stove. He rubbed his temples, trying to process what had just happened. One moment he had been checking the corral, the next he had been dodging a furious bull, and then, out of nowhere, Clara Thompson had kissed him on the cheek. "I need coffee," he muttered, though even that felt like it wouldn't solve the confusion in his mind. From the corner of the kitchen, his assistant, a lanky young man named Toby, peeked in, grinning. "So, heard about your little adventure this morning," he said, trying to sound casual but failing miserably. Luke raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Toby leaned against the doorway, unable to hide his amusement. "You know, the bull, the storm, and the, kiss." His voice cracked slightly as he tried to keep it together. Luke's jaw dropped. "You didn't—" "No one, Toby, don't tell me you actually saw that." Toby's grin widened. "Saw it? Everyone saw it." Even old man Jenkins from down the road was laughing about it. "You kissed by a girl while out in the rain, and no one saw it coming." "Ha!" Luke groaned and buried his face in his hands. "Why is everyone always around when something humiliating happens?" Toby laughed. "It's the universe, Luke. Always ready to embarrass the mighty rancher." Luke didn't have time to argue because the door opened and in walked Clara herself, carrying a small bag of supplies and a knowing smile. She shook the rainwater from her coat and looked around the kitchen with a playful gleam in her eyes. "Morning, cowboy," she said casually. Luke froze. His heart thumped loudly in his chest. "Morning," he managed, his voice sounding far too stiff. Clara glanced at Toby, who had moved quietly to the corner, still smirking. "So, you guys know each other, huh?" she teased, raising an eyebrow. Toby, unable to resist, shouted, "Oh yeah, Luke got himself kissed by a storm-chasing hero this morning." Luke turned to Toby, glaring, but Clara laughed softly, a sound that made Luke feel both embarrassed and strangely warm inside. "I see," she said, smirking at him. "So that's how the story's spreading. I didn't know I was starting a legend this early in the day."
Luke rubbed his face again. "You didn't have to."
"You know, do that," he said, referring to the kiss. "I mean, I appreciate it. Don't get me wrong."
"You saved my life, but—" Clara's smirk widened. "But?"
"It was unexpected," Luke admitted, his ears turning red. "Completely unexpected." "That's the fun part, isn't it?" she said teasingly. "Life is unpredictable, and sometimes you have to take action. Fast." Luke swallowed hard, realizing he had no clever reply.
"Yeah, fast," he mumbled, though his mind was still replaying the morning's chaos.
The moment was interrupted by Toby, who was now openly laughing. "Come on, Luke. Admit it. You liked it." Luke shot him a glare that could have frozen water. But even he had to admit that Toby had a point. He had been flustered, yes, but there was also a strange warmth in his chest when Clara had kissed him. He shook his head quickly, trying to push the thought away. Clara chuckled and picked up the bag she had brought. "Well, I'm here now to make sure you're okay."
And to make sure the rest of your cattle don't rebel while you're busy staring at me like a lost calf," Luke groaned.
"I'm not staring, well, maybe a little?" She smirked again and rolled her eyes. Figures. After a few moments, they decided to step outside to inspect the corral again. The rain had eased into a gentle drizzle, leaving the earth muddy and soft underfoot. Luke led the way, still cautious around Bramble, who had returned to his pen, looking much calmer now. Clara followed closely, carrying a small kit of supplies, ropes, and tools. As they worked together to reinforce the fences properly this time, Luke couldn't help but notice how naturally Clara handled herself around the animals. She moved with confidence, speaking softly to the cows and horses, earning their trust with ease. It was a skill Luke admired deeply. He had always known the land and the animals, but Clara had a way of connecting that went beyond knowledge. She understood instinct, emotion, and timing in a way that fascinated him. "You know," Luke said, breaking the comfortable silence, "you're lucky you didn't get trampled this morning." Clara raised an eyebrow. "Lucky?"
Or maybe I'm just good at reading bulls.
she replied, her tone playful. Luke chuckled despite himself. "Maybe, or maybe you're just fearless." "Fearless isn't always smart," Clara countered, tightening a rope around a fence post. "But it's helpful sometimes." The two worked side by side, the silence between them filled with the sound of wind, the soft drizzle, and the occasional snort from Bramble. Luke felt a strange sense of calm in her presence. Even though the morning had been nothing short of chaotic, it was as if her confidence had a grounding effect on him, helping him see past the adrenaline and fear. After finishing the repairs, they stood back to admire their work. The corral was secure, Bramble calm, and the storm clouds beginning to drift away. Luke wiped his hands on his jeans and looked at Clara, who was shaking mud from her boots with a small laugh. "You know," Luke said carefully, "I still can't believe you kissed me this morning. And yet here you are, talking about it like it happened yesterday." Luke groaned. "It's not something you forget easily." "I suppose not. But it was necessary. Someone had to keep you from becoming a pancake this morning." "I owe you big time." "You already owe me," Clara said teasingly, "for calling in reinforcements next time you ignore a storm warning." Luke laughed, shaking his head. "Fair enough." As they walked back toward the house, their conversation drifted to lighter topics: favorite meals, the stubbornness of Bramble, and funny stories from their childhoods on the ranch. Luke found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't expected, enjoying her company far more than he would have admitted. He realized that Clara's boldness, her humor, and her straightforward nature made her someone easy to be around, someone who could bring light even on a gray, stormy day. By the time they reached the porch, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, and the first hints of sunlight were peeking through the clouds. Luke turned to Clara, feeling a mix of gratitude and something else he couldn't quite name. "You know," he said quietly, "I didn't think mornings could start like this. Not with storms, bulls, and unexpected kisses." Clara laughed softly, a sound that seemed to blend with the gentle wind. "Well, life is full of surprises, Cowboy. You just have to be ready for them." Luke nodded, realizing she was right. Today had been a reminder that life could change in a heartbeat. Danger, laughter, and unexpected moments could all come together, leaving behind stories that would be remembered and shared for years. He glanced at Clara one more time, catching her smirk as she looked back at him. In that moment, Luke knew something had shifted. Their connection wasn't just about the morning's chaos. It was about trust, bravery, and an unspoken understanding that they had each left an impression on the other. And deep down, Luke knew that the story of the kiss, wild, unexpected, and completely unplanned, was just the beginning of a new chapter in both their lives. The days after the storm were calm but full of quiet energy on the McAllister ranch. Luke found himself thinking more about Clara than he expected. It wasn't just the morning of the bull and the kiss, it was how she had carried herself, her confidence, her humor, and the way she seemed to understand the animals better than anyone he had ever met. He caught himself glancing at the driveway whenever he heard tires crunching, hoping it would be her coming back. Clara, meanwhile, had made it clear she wasn't done checking in. She called Luke later that week to ask if she could come by to inspect the cattle, making sure that nothing else had been damaged by the storm. Luke, trying to act casual, agreed. "Sure, come by any time," he said, though his voice betrayed more excitement than he intended. When she arrived that morning, the sun was just peeking over the hills, casting a warm glow across the ranch. Clara stepped out of her truck with her usual confidence, carrying her vet bag and a thermos of coffee. She waved at Luke with a small smile that made his heart beat a little faster.
"Morning, cowboy," she said cheerfully. Luke smiled back, scratching the back of his neck.
"Morning. Ready to check on my stubborn herd?"
"Always ready. Let's see if your bulls survived the storm better than your pride did."
Luke chuckled at her teasing as they walked together toward the pastures. There was an easy rhythm between them now, the kind that came from mutual respect and the shared experience of the storm. Bramble and the other bulls seemed calmer today, moving slowly across the grass, as if they knew the humans walking among them were trustworthy. Clara knelt by a cow that had a small scratch on her side, examining it carefully. Luke watched her, fascinated.
"You have a way with them,"
he said quietly. Clara looked up and smiled. "It's about patience and respect. They feel your energy. If you're calm, they're calm. If you're scared or rushed, they sense it too. I guess I still have a lot to learn. Been doing this for years, but you make it look easy." Clara chuckled. "Years of experience helps, but a little instinct goes a long way too. You'll get there." As they moved through the pastures, Luke found himself opening up to Clara more than he normally did with anyone. He told her stories about growing up on the ranch, about his father teaching him to ride, about his older brother who had moved to the city. Clara listened with genuine interest, asking questions that made Luke feel like she really wanted to understand him, not just the ranch, but him. In return, Clara shared bits of her own life. She talked about growing up on a small farm, about how she had wanted to become a veterinarian since she was a child, and about the challenges she faced as a young woman in a field mostly dominated by men. Luke was impressed by her determination and honesty. He admired how she spoke so openly without hesitation, showing both strength and vulnerability at the same time. They stopped at a small stream where the cows often drank. Clara knelt down and washed the scratch she had noticed earlier, murmuring softly to the cow. Luke leaned against a fence post, watching her work, feeling a warmth he couldn't quite explain. It wasn't just attraction, it was admiration, respect, and something that felt like the beginning of friendship turning into something more. "Luke," Clara said suddenly, glancing up at him, "you don't have to do everything alone here. Even though you're strong and capable, there's nothing wrong with asking for help." He had always been independent, proud of being able to handle things on his own. But looking at her, he realized that sometimes it was okay to accept help. In fact, sometimes it made everything better.
Yeah?
"You're right," he admitted. "It's just hard to let go of control sometimes." "I get that. But control isn't everything. Trust matters too." They shared a quiet moment, watching the cows move across the pasture, sunlight glinting off the stream. Luke felt a sense of peace that he hadn't experienced in a long time. It wasn't just about the ranch or the animals. It was about the connection he felt with Clara, a bond formed from trust, laughter, and shared experiences. As they walked back toward the ranch house, Clara teased him gently. "So, Mr. Pablo McAllister, are you going to tell anyone about our morning adventure, or are you keeping it to yourself this time?" Luke laughed, I think I'll keep it between us, though I'm not sure I could stop Toby from spreading it if he wanted to." Clara rolled her eyes playfully. "He's hopeless, isn't he?" Completely begrinning. Completely. But that's part of the charm. They reached the porch, and Clara handed Luke a thermos of coffee she had brought. "Thought you might need this after all the excitement," she said. Luke accepted it gratefully, taking a sip of the hot, strong brew. "Thanks," he said softly. "Really?" Clara's smile softened. "Any time, Luke. You saved Bramble this morning, but I think we both know it was a team effort." Luke felt a warmth in his chest, a mix of gratitude and something else he couldn't quite name. He wanted to say more, to tell her how much he appreciated her presence, her courage, and her humor, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he nodded and offered a small smile. Over the next few days, Clara returned several times to help with the ranch. Sometimes she came to check on the cattle, other times to help with minor repairs, or just to share a meal and conversation. Each visit strengthened their connection, creating a sense of familiarity and comfort that Luke hadn't realized he was missing. They teased each other constantly, about the stubborn bulls, about Toby's antics, about the unpredictable weather. But beneath the humor was a growing trust and understanding. One afternoon, as they worked to mend a section of fence near the far pasture, a gentle rain began to fall. Luke glanced at Clara, who seemed unfazed by the drizzle, her hair dampening slightly as she worked. He felt a sudden urge to protect her, to make sure she stayed safe and dry. "You don't have to get soaked for me," he said, reaching for a tarp to cover her. Clara laughed, brushing off the concern. "I've dealt with worse. Besides, you'll have to do better than rain to stop me." Luke smiled, shaking his head. "You really are fearless, aren't you?" Clara's eyes twinkled. "Maybe. Or maybe I just like a good challenge." Luke felt his chest tighten. He didn't know if it was the rain, the closeness, or the way she looked at him, but he realized he was enjoying every moment, every conversation, every laugh. There was a spark between them, subtle but undeniable, and he couldn't ignore it any longer. As the rain fell gently around them, Luke decided to take a small risk. "Clara," he said softly, I like having you around. More than I expected, actually." Clara paused, looking at him with surprise and a small, genuine smile. "I like being here too, Luke. More than I thought I would." They stood for a moment, the rain falling around them, the sound of the pasture and the cattle filling the air. It wasn't a dramatic confession, no bold gestures or grand declarations, just two people recognizing a connection that had grown naturally through shared moments, trust, and quiet laughter. By the time the rain stopped, Luke and Clara were laughing again, teasing each other about muddy boots and wet hair. But beneath the laughter, a new understanding had formed. They weren't just friends or neighbors anymore. They were partners in a way that went beyond words, built on respect, shared experience, and the simple joy of being in each other's company. Luke watched Clara walk back to her truck that evening, feeling a strange mix of happiness and anticipation. He knew that this was only the beginning. There would be more storms, more challenges, and perhaps more unexpected moments, like the kiss that had started it all. But for now, he was content. He had found someone who made life brighter, who could make him laugh, and who could stand fearlessly by his side when the world felt unpredictable. And as he looked out over the pastures, the sunlight glinting off the damp grass, Luke realized that some surprises were worth embracing, especially when they came wrapped in laughter, courage, and the warmth of someone who cared. The summer had been unusually hot, and the grass in the pastures had turned brittle and golden under the relentless sun. Luke McAllister noticed it first while checking the fences early one morning. A thin wisp of smoke curled in the distance near the edge of the northern hills. At first he thought it might be someone burning trash or clearing land, but the smell of smoke grew stronger, sharper, and unmistakable. He ran back to the ranch house, heart pounding.
Toby, get your boots on. Grab the hoses and buckets. We've got a fire starting up north.
Toby, still half asleep, scrambled to obey. A fire? Already? But it's just morning. Luke didn't have time to explain. He grabbed a walkie-talkie and called neighboring ranches, warning them of the smoke. The summer winds were blowing strong, and dry grass meant the fire could spread quickly. By the time Clara arrived, she had heard about the fire from one of her clients on the neighboring ranch. Luke was already directing the ranch hands. She jumped out of her truck, carrying her medical kit and a water backpack.
"Luke, how bad is it?" she asked, concern clear in her voice.
Not good, Luke said grimly. The wind is pushing it toward the north pasture.
We need to move the cattle and make fire breaks before it gets out of hand. Clara nodded, rolling up her sleeves. Let's get to work. They moved quickly, working side by side. Luke coordinated the ranch hands while Clara helped calm the animals and guided them towards safer areas. The bulls, usually stubborn and unpredictable, followed her instructions surprisingly well, as if sensing her calm determination. Luke couldn't help but admire her skill. Even in the face of danger, she moved with confidence, calm, and focus. The smoke thickened as they worked. The heat from the approaching fire was intense, making the air shimmer. Luke and Clara shouted instructions over the roar of flames and crackling grass, their voices nearly lost in the chaos. At one point, Luke saw a group of cows panicking near the edge of the northern fence. Bramble, the stubborn bull from the storm weeks ago, was trying to push back through a weak spot. "Clara! Help me with Bramble!" Luke yelled. Clara didn't hesitate. She sprinted through the smoke, waving her arms to get the bull's attention. Bramble stopped, confused, and then, trusting her, turned and followed her guidance. Luke caught up, and together they steered the bull into a safe enclosure. Breathing heavily, Luke glanced at Clara. "You really are fearless, you know that?" Clara shrugged, sweat and soot streaking her face. "Someone has to keep you alive, cowboy."
"You can't do it all alone." Luke smiled, despite the danger.
There was something about her presence that made him feel grounded, even with flames and smoke swirling around them. He realized that he trusted her completely, in a way he had never trusted anyone. The fire kept spreading, and they had to act fast. Luke and Clara worked tirelessly, moving cattle, clearing dry brush, and setting up temporary fire breaks. At one point, a sudden gust of wind sent sparks toward a small barn on the edge of the property. Luke froze, seeing the flames lick the dry wood. "Luke, the barn!" Clara shouted. Without thinking, Luke ran toward the barn, but a fallen branch blocked his path. Clara was already there, moving quickly, pulling him out of harm's way. The barn ignited, but thanks to their quick action and the fire breaks they had set up, the fire didn't spread further. Luke looked at Clara, chest heaving.
You saved me again, he said, voice shaking slightly.
Clara gave him a small, tired smile. "And you saved the cattle? We make a pretty good team, don't we?" Luke nodded, feeling a mix of relief and admiration. He realized that danger had a way of showing the truth about people, their courage, their character, and their hearts. Clara had proven herself time and again, not just in playful moments, but in life or death situations. The afternoon stretched on, the fire slowly coming under control thanks to their combined efforts. Other ranchers arrived to help, bringing extra water and equipment. Smoke filled the sky, but Luke and Clara continued working, side by side, making sure every animal was accounted for and every firebreak secure. At one point, they paused to catch their breath. The sun was beginning to dip toward the horizon, casting an orange glow over the hills. Both were covered in soot and sweat, their clothes damp from water and rain buckets they had carried, but neither seemed to mind. Luke looked at Clara, who was brushing dirt and ash from her hair. "You know," he said quietly, "I don't think I've ever seen anyone handle something like this the way you do. Calm, smart, fearless. I don't know how you do it." Clara laughed softly, a sound that reminded Luke of calmer, happier mornings on the ranch. "I just focus on what needs to be done. Fear doesn't help anyone, and besides," she added with a playful grin, "you'd better start learning from me if you want to survive the next fire." Luke chuckled, feeling a warmth in his chest. "I think I could learn a lot from you." The fire was finally under control by evening, though the smell of smoke lingered in the air. The cattle were safe, the ranch intact, and the sense of relief was almost overwhelming. Luke and Clara stood side by side, watching the last wisps of smoke drift away, their hands sore and their bodies tired, but their hearts full. "You know," Luke said, turning to her, "after all of this, I think I might start calling you my lucky charm." Clara raised an eyebrow, smiling. "Or my favorite troublemaker?" Luke laughed, feeling lighter than he had all day. "Maybe a little of both." They shared a quiet moment, the sun setting behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Luke realized that the bond between them had grown stronger through the day's chaos. It wasn't just about playful teasing or unexpected kisses anymore. It was about trust, respect, and knowing that no matter what happened, they had each other's backs. As they walked back toward the ranch house, their boots squishing in the damp earth, Luke glanced at Clara. "Thanks for being here," he said softly. Clara smiled, looking at him with warmth and understanding. "I wouldn't have missed it for the world. Besides, you'd probably be a pancake without me." "Yeah, probably." That night, as the ranch settled into a quiet calm, Luke couldn't stop thinking about the day. The fire had been terrifying, yes, but it had also shown him something important, that there was strength in partnership, courage in trust, and unexpected happiness in moments shared with someone who cared. He thought about Clara's fearless determination, her playful smile, and the way she had saved him more than once, and he knew, without a doubt, that this was more than just friendship. There was something growing between them, something strong, brave, and real. Luke went to bed that night tired but content, feeling a sense of hope and anticipation. He knew that the days ahead would bring new challenges, storms, hard work, and maybe even more dangerous situations. But he also knew that with Clara by his side, he could face anything. And as he drifted off to sleep, he smiled, thinking about the spark between them, the laughter they shared, and the unspoken promise that whatever came next, they would face it together. The wildfire had passed, leaving behind a landscape marked by blackened grass, smoke lingering faintly in the air, and the unmistakable smell of charred earth. But the McAllister Ranch had survived, and so had the people who mattered most. Luke McAllister stood on the porch, watching the sun rise over the hills, the soft golden light promising a new day. He rubbed his sore arms and legs, remembering the chaos of the previous day, the heat, the smoke, and the terror of almost losing the northern pasture. Clara Thompson appeared at the edge of the porch, carrying a small box of supplies for repairing fences and tending to any injured animals. Her hair was pulled back into a loose ponytail, strands falling over her face, and her clothes were still smudged with soot from yesterday. She smiled as she approached, and Luke felt the familiar warmth spread through his chest. "Morning," she said softly, her eyes reflecting both relief and amusement. "Morning," Luke replied, trying to sound casual but failing. "Sleep well?" Clara shrugged, leaning against the railing. "I slept like a log once I finally got home, but I kept thinking about the ranch and the cattle. Can't help it." Luke nodded. "I get that. I couldn't stop thinking about it either. And, well, you." Clara looked at him, a small, surprised smile forming.
Me? Luke cleared his throat, feeling the familiar heat in his cheeks. Yeah.
"I mean, not just the fire, but everything. How you handled it."
How you're always there when something goes wrong.
"I don't know what I'd do without you, Clara." For a moment, there was silence between them. The sun continued to rise, painting the hills with light, the air fresh and calm after the storm of the past few days. "Luke, you'd probably survive somehow, but I'm glad I was here, and I'm glad we were in it together." They moved toward the pastures, checking on the animals and assessing the damage. The blackened patches of grass worried Luke, but Clara remained calm, her presence steadying him. They worked together methodically, repairing fences, checking cattle, and clearing debris. Every now and then they laughed at small mishaps, Toby getting tangled in a rope, a cow stubbornly refusing to move, or Bramble nudging Luke too hard. Even after the stress of the fire, the ranch felt alive, full of energy and life. By mid-morning, they paused under the shade of a large oak tree, both sweaty, dirty, and tired. Luke handed Clara a water bottle, and they sat together on the grass, catching their breath. "You know," Clara said thoughtfully, "fires, storms, they remind us what's important. Life can change in a moment, and sometimes we forget to notice the people around us until it's too late." Luke looked at her, realizing how true her words were. He thought about the storm weeks ago, the bull, the kiss, and how his feelings had grown quietly ever since. He had admired her bravery and skill, respected her intelligence, and, most importantly, found himself thinking about her constantly. "Clara," he said softly, "I don't want to wait any longer. I like you. More than just a friend or neighbor. I've liked you since the morning with Bramble. And I think
You feel the same. Clara's eyes widened slightly, then softened.
She reached out, brushing a strand of hair from Luke's forehead. "Luke, I do feel the same. I was just waiting for you to say it." Luke's heart leaped, and without thinking, he took her hand gently. "Then we don't have to wait anymore. I want us to see where this goes. Together." Clara squeezed his hand, smiling. "I'd like that, very much." The sun continued to rise, warming them as they sat in silence, hand in hand, appreciating the moment. The ranch, the hills, the animals, they were all still here, and so were they, safe, together, and ready for whatever came next. Over the next few weeks, life slowly returned to normal on the ranch. But things felt different now. There was laughter, warmth, and a gentle closeness between Luke and Clara that everyone noticed. The ranch hands joked about them endlessly, but Luke didn't mind. He didn't mind at all. One afternoon, as they walked together through the pastures checking fences, Clara paused to point out a spot where the grass had started growing again. "Look at this," she said, smiling. "Nature is resilient. just like us. Luke nodded, looking around at the green shoots emerging from the blackened soil. Yeah, tell.
It's amazing, just like us.
They shared a quiet laugh, walking side by side, their shoulders brushing occasionally. Luke realized that it wasn't just the excitement or danger that had brought them together. It was the simple moments, the shared responsibilities, and the mutual respect and trust that had grown between them. That evening, as the sun dipped below the hills and painted the sky with brilliant oranges and pinks, Luke and Clara sat on the porch swing together, watching the ranch settle into a peaceful quiet. You know, Clara said softly, leaning against his shoulder, I never expected to find this. Someone I could rely on, someone I could laugh with, someone I like. Luke smiled, brushing her hair back gently. I feel the same. I don't know what I'd do without you now. The moment stretched, comfortable and intimate. They didn't need words. The connection was clear in their smiles, in the way they held each other's hands, and in the quiet understanding that they were no longer just friends or neighbors. As night fell, the stars appeared, twinkling above the ranch like tiny promises. Luke and Clara stayed on the porch swing, talking quietly, laughing softly, and sharing dreams for the future. They spoke about the ranch, about animals, and about plans for the seasons ahead. But beneath all the conversation was a deeper understanding, a bond that had been forged through storms, danger, laughter, and small, meaningful moments. Luke realized that life on the ranch, with its challenges and unpredictability, was better with Clara by his side. She made the hard work feel lighter, the stressful days more bearable, and the quiet evenings brighter. And he knew that whatever the future held, storms, fires, or simple sunny mornings, they would face it together. Days turned into weeks, and the ranch slowly healed from the fire. The grass grew green again, the animals returned to their normal routines, and life returned to its peaceful rhythm. But for Luke and Clara, something permanent had changed. They were partners now, in work, in life, and in heart. One evening, as they finished feeding the cattle and walked back toward the house, Luke stopped and looked at Clara. You know, he said, we've been through storms, bulls, and even fires together. I think we can handle anything now. Clara smiled, squeezing his hand. I think so too, and I wouldn't want to face anything without you. Luke laughed softly, pulling her close. Then it's settled. We're a team. Forever. Clara laughed too, resting her head against his shoulder. Forever sounds good. The sun set completely, leaving the ranch bathed in soft twilight. Luke and Clara stood together, holding each other, knowing that life would continue to bring challenges, laughter, and unexpected moments. But no matter what, they would face it side by side. And in that quiet, perfect moment, Luke realized that the kiss on that stormy morning, the one that had shocked him and started it all, was just the beginning. It had led to trust, friendship, and love that would grow stronger every day. The ranch, the hills, and the animals were all still there, but more importantly, so were Luke and Clara. Safe, happy, and together, ready for a future full of hope, adventure, and shared dreams.